Hello there, welcome to the Commons collaborative project Expressa Global and Ukrainian Media. I'm Elena Solodovnikova, and it's great pleasure for me to welcome Vadim Mojeiko, political analyst and coordinator of the Belarus Analytic workshop, Our Vision Expert Network. Hello, Vadim.
Nice to meet you, Elena.
Nice to meet you too. Okay, let's proceed to our topics. The first of it, the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada has tried to recognize Belarus as an occupied territory at the legislative level several times. Why did this not happen, and why it is important to push this issue?
Of course, I didn't know why Verkhovna Rada is thinking it's important to push it, but in general, why Belarus is not recognized as occupied. I think, first of all, because Belarus is not occupied. Because when it's just simple. If we look for a country, we simply see the difference between Belarus and, for example, occupied parts of Ukraine. Because symbols of occupation is when some like local authorities, they come from Russia, or like military officers come from Russia, like a full control formally and non-formally come to Russia. And if you look like this, of course, Belarus is not occupied. I can say that if Belarus is not occupied, it's not mean that everything is so good. No. But we see that, unfortunately, Lukashenko rules the country. He's not democratically elected president. But anyway, he's from Belarus. There is no Krasnoyarsk civil servant who come from Krasnoyarsk to Minsk. No. We see Belarusians in all positions. We see Belarusian army with Belarusian officers. So there is no any really examples. What do we mean about Belarus occupation? And mostly people use this formula just to express how much Russian influence grows in Belarus during last years. And this is true. This is true of Russian power, Russian soft power. We see how many Russian cultural centers opened in Belarusian regions. We see really strong influence of Russia in the taxation sphere. But anyway, this is not occupation. And in general, for me, it's always a big question why some people in Verkhovna Rada want to push it. Because if we say that Belarus is occupied, it means that there is no responsibility for Lukashenko, because Lukashenko is have no power. Maybe all responsibility go to Russia, because occupied countries, for example, during the Second World War, of course, there's no questions for them after the war, because they just occupied, they're victims, nothing more. So I think that sounds strange. We can't say that Lukashenko is a victim, Belarus is occupied of Russia, and whole responsibility come to Kremlin, and Lukashenko is innocent in this case. Totally not. So that's why I think Belarus is not occupied, and it's very good that Verkhovna Rada just knows that, that's a fact, and Belarus is not occupied.
Well, but in what official status should Ukraine cooperate with Belarus now?
So I think the status of Belarus and official Minsk and Lukashenko's regime now, it's so simple. It's co-aggression. So if you look for UN documents, 1974 declaration, we see that providing of a territory for another country to attack some third country, it's a co-aggression. So Minsk is co-aggressor. Of course, there is no Lukashenko initiative to start the war, but Lukashenko fully support Putin in this case. And in practice, we see that Lukashenko provide everything what Putin wants. Lukashenko provide Belarusian territory for Russian army to attack Ukraine from north, and in general, only because of this. For example, Bucha happened. Because people who do the things in Bucha, they come from Belarusian territory, unfortunately. And this happened because Lukashenko is still with power in Belarus, because we simply understood that Belarusian democratic forces never will give such possibilities for Russia. We see how Lukashenko provide territory for Russian air forces to attack Ukraine, to Russian trains, to military columns. to also the Russian retreats. We see how Prigozhin and Wagner come to Belarusian territory. So we see how Lukashenko give for Russia all of military equipment Russia need. So we see that, yeah, Belarus as an official state and Minsk regime, Alexander Lukashenko, yeah, it's a co-aggressors, and that's about relations. So sometimes we see how Ukraine can make some contacts even with Russia to exchange people. Yeah, sometimes it's possible. Well, everything is possible, but this is relations between aggressor and victim.
Exactly, but why has Ukraine still not ended not diplomatic but trade relations with Lukashenko regime? Is it a business of usual?
Oh, it's a really good question for Ukraine, and we also can mention, for example, now we're talking about just a wartime, but for example, year before war in 2021, when Lukashenko is officially not recognized as a president in Ukraine, when Lukashenko do a lot of brutal violations of human rights in Minsk, tortures people, beat people, arrest people, and Ukraine still beautifully trade with Minsk by not only gasoline, but also another oil products, electricity, whatever. So in some cases, just a business as usual. And I know that sometimes Ukrainian colleagues, they explain that okay, they can buy oil from Russia or from Minsk. Of course, Minsk is not so good, but Russia even worse, so it's understandable. But anyway, I think it's just today's case. It's just an example what can happen after business as usual. So first you buy some mazut from Belarus because of course Lukashenko is not democratic, but we need some materials to build a lot of roads in Ukraine. And next time Belarus use this Ukrainian money, for example, to buy some more military techniques, or to build like a new roads and bridges to Ukraine used by Russian army. That's how it's possible that it's happened. And of course, I don't think that I'm a person who should make some moral statements and ethical statements about Ukrainian authorities. But I think it's also a good example for everybody who think that this is a good example good idea to make these ethical statements about Belarusians, because of course there is no unfortunately in this case of trade there is no totally black and totally white sides, and now I think that's why situation mostly changed when war started, but trade is not fully stopped. And I think the questions for Ukrainian politicians, for Ukrainian society, is it good to trade with Lukashenko regime and to give money for them, or it's not?
Okay, in your opinion, are Belarus really preparing for the full-scale escalation now?
I think that's a lot of Lukashenko's rhetoric about that, and this is a part of whole official Minsk actions after when war started. Now that's what I say these last 2 years for Ukrainian media, and I can repeat that looks like Lukashenko's role is not to really in fact involved to the war by Belarusian army, but Lukashenko's role is to make problems for Ukraine, Ukraine should be in a status that nobody know will Belarusian army join the war next day or not. So that's why Minsk do a lot of provocations on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border, a lot of preparations, a lot of strong military statements. We see a series of military trainings, like a common Belarusian Russian. And I remember every training started, and Ukrainian media calling me and asking, okay, so war by Belarusian army, so it will start next day, yeah? I say no and explain, and nothing happened. But of course, it's about Ukrainian attention. So according to this not understandable situation, Ukraine takes some soldiers, some military technique, some equipment, whatever, or not in Donbass, but on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. And that's what Russia exactly wants. And that's what Lukashenko can really provide to Russia and beautifully do it. So looks like during the war, it will be more and more Belarusian Russian military trainings, a lot of provocations, a lot of strong statements. And of course, like if it's your strategic, so on this idea, you should make a stronger statements every time. You can't be on the same level. So that's why we see a lot of things which looks like escalation from Minsk, but in practice, nothing happened. So that will continue because it's still interesting for Putin, and as I say, Lukashenko will do it.
Yes, but under what conditions will Belarus military be forced to take part in the war directly? Do they have enough military forces? Mm-hmm. I'm based on the last statements of Lukashenko.
It's a really good question. Of course, I'm not like a military analyst, so I can speak about types of tanks and whatever. But what I can say, we see that Belarusian army transfer a lot of technique and equipment to Russia just because Russia need it. So maybe it looks like now there's not so much technique in Belarusian army like 2 years before. We see that Belarusian army have no real experience in real war. For example, Russian army, they have war in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Syria, some Wagner groups in Africa, whatever. There is no experience for Belarusian army like this. And of course, the third thing, it's a moral spirit, because even for Russian army, it's not so good. We see a lot of stories about it. So people, they're not so like brave soldiers who want to protect Mother Russia and Putin and fight Ukraine's Nazi. No. Looks like a lot of them totally not so morally ready for war. But for Belarusian army, like the main problem for this spirit is that there is no sense for Belarus in this war at all. There is no any idea, even in propaganda. We can't find info why Belarus needs this war. What's the sense? And the problem is for Belarus that Belarus will be in a bad situation in any case. If we just imagine that Russia wins this war, of course Belarus will be next. Really easy. It's bad for Belarus. If we see that Russia will lose this war, okay, Belarus will be co-aggressor of loser. It's also very bad. So there is no really good explanation for what we should fight. And there is no some imperial spirit in Belarus because we're not Russia, we're not empire any time anywhere. And so ideas that Belarusians should fight for Ukrainian territories, it's not understandable for anybody. Why we need it? Nobody says that we need it. And of course, war is not really just in general, even not this war, but war in general, it's totally not popular in Belarus. And if Russians say that about Second World War, Russians say we can do it again, in Belarus we say never again. Because for Belarus, Second World War, something really personal. It's a personal story. It's happened on Belarusian territories. Like everybody, they have some like a grandmother, grandfather, or grandfather who die on this war, who personally know this experience, how it's terrible, how it's disgusting in practice. And so that's why war is totally not popular for Belarusians. And after all of these cases, of course, there is no like a sociological data about soldiers, because like any army in the world, there is no possibility for independent scientists to make independent interviews with soldiers. But in general, when sociological service of Chatham House asking Belarusians what Belarusians think, will Belarusian army take part if it will be an order to go to Ukraine and fight, what Belarusian army will do? And the most popular answer is we don't know. We have no idea what will happen. And also another popular questions is that it's more the same level, 20%, that somebody thinks that Belarusian army, they will fight. Somebody thinks that maybe they just use their weapon to attack their officers and to attack officials because they think it's not so good that these officers send them to die in Ukraine. Somebody thinks that Belarusian army just will do nothing. But after all of this sociology, what we know that nobody knows what really happened, and it will be different things. Somebody will fight against official means. Whatever will happen. Somebody maybe will go to Ukraine with a weapon and join Kostuskalinovsky team and fight against also Belarus and Russia. So after all of this, it's so clear to understand that there is not a lot of sense, not a lot of military sense to make this happen, to send the Belarusian army in Ukraine. And if it's happened, what will happen next? Next time, Russia will they should to somehow support Lukashenko in this situation, somehow protect the Belarus-Russia border. And after all of this, it's so clear to understood why Belarus army still not take part in the war. It's not because of Lukashenko will or whatever. It's because of really no military sense, and this happened because of a Belarusian anti-war spirit, not only current, but as I say, also historically based. And after all of this, there is no make sense for Putin and Lukashenko to join Belarusian army. And maybe the main thing what Belarusian army can do in this war, it's to make the provocations on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border, and that's why Ukraine should take some resources to this border, not in the war.
But can Belarus open the corridor for Baltic states to Russian troops?
Exactly. Unfortunately, exactly. I can say that if you look for these 2 years, we clearly know that Lukashenko will do everything what Putin really want in this war. We have a lot of examples what Putin really want. He take. If Russia want to attack again Ukraine from Belarusian territory, it's happened next day. If Russia want to attack Baltic states or Poland or whatever, or everybody, it will happen. And unfortunately, it's understandable. It's understandable because of during the last presidential elections, Lukashenko lose his power, totally lose support of the society. We see that society support Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, not Lukashenko. And that's why now Lukashenko status, like a person who take a power in Minsk, it's based on Putin's support. That's why Lukashenko can do everything to not to lose his power. And in this case, it's not to lose Putin's support. So that's why Lukashenko ready to do everything. And that's, I think it's really a good example for everybody who thinks that democracy, free elections, human rights, it's just an internal thing. Nobody should care about what's happening in neighbors. Unfortunately, no. This example is a clear explanation why it's important for neighbors. Why Lukashenko in Belarus, it's a problem not only for Belarusians, not only for Belarusian rights. Lukashenko can torture not only Belarusian democratic activists in prisons. No, it's a problem for the whole countries around. It's already a problem for Ukraine. It can be a problem for Baltic states. And not only Lukashenko torture Belarusian activists in prisons, but also Russian soldiers come from Belarus can torture Ukrainian citizens in Ukraine. So that's why I think it's really the best example for everybody all around the world, why it's not a good idea to make a business as usual with dictator who do such things like Lukashenko. It's not an internal problem. It's a problem for everybody, and maybe it's a good idea to do something before things happen. It was good if our neighbors will stop support us to stop Lukashenko before war started, and the same now why it's so important to support Belarusian democratic forces, stop Lukashenko now before we can see how Russian troops attack Baltic states through Belarus. before we see how Russia used Belarusian territory for nuclear weapon attack to Ukraine or to Poland or whatever. Maybe we should do something now, not after this.
As I want to make a step back and talk about Belarus' so-called parliamentary and local election a month ago, why was it important to ignore pseudo-elections for people who can vote?
I think that the total problem is these elections that they not looks like elections. That's why I say even that looks, because of course there's not a question of a democratic standards. Of course, previous parliamentary and local elections in Lukashenko time also not democratic. But the specific of these elections is that there's no any space for any other political opinions during these elections. So there's no any opposition political candidate on them. Whole opposition political parties will liquidate. Dmitry Kuchuk, a former head of liquidated Green Party, he tried to take part in these elections. He even can't collect signatures. He was arrested and he's still in jail. And I think it's a best example what happened if somebody in Belarus want not to ignore these elections and somehow participate in them. And as I can say, Dmitry Kuchuk, it's not some revolutionary or whatever. No. As we see, even now, Dmitry Kuchuk still in Belarus, still not imprisoned before these elections. But even for them, there is no space for these elections. These elections is only, a ballot with one guy who supports Lukashenko and another guy who supports Lukashenko. And of course, you can choose between them, but there's not a lot of sense. There's no different ideas shown in these elections. There's no debates, no anything. And we see how officials come to these elections, for military operations. It's a lot of military forces. It's like a policeman in every polling stations. We see videos how policemen they come to vote in cabin. It looks what's happening inside. People was arrested when they make a photo of their own ballot. So after all of this, I think it's clearly understandable why there is no interest of people to take part in elections like this.
Yes, unfortunately, Vadim, Putin again threatened the world with a nuclear strike. In this regard, it's worth mentioning that he has moved a nuclear weapon on the territory of Belarus. Why did he do this?
I think, unfortunately, it's really unfortunately it's very bad for Belarus because we understood why he do it. Because if Russia will use nuclear weapon, for example, from Russian territory to NATO territory, it's clearly what's happened next. NATO will attack Russia with nuclear weapon. But if Putin use nuclear weapon from Belarusian territory and attack Ukraine, it looks like maybe NATO countries shouldn't attack Moscow after this. Maybe they should attack Minsk after this. And so that's why Putin do it. It's really a great idea how to make a situation when Russia can use nuclear weapon, but not from Russian territory, just to protect themselves. Really good idea for Russia, for Putin. Really bad idea for Belarus. Because, after all of this, when nuclear weapon come to Belarus, and I remember these discussions when this actively discussed the idea of some tactical nuclear weapon used in Ukraine. I remember how a former U.S. military officers they make statements that if Russia attack Ukraine with tactical nuclear weapon, maybe it's a good idea to attack some Russian military objects outside of Russia, maybe in Syria, maybe in Belarus. And when I read it, I understood, it sounds really logically understandable, but in practice, what we see, how a former U.S. military officer, a smart person, he normally discussed the idea how to make a nuclear attack to Belarus and just killed a lot of some Belarusians, grannies who live somewhere in village. and have no possibility totally to influence Putin and Lukashenko decision. So that's why, of course, nuclear weapon, Russian nuclear weapon shouldn't be on a Belarusian territory. I think it's the biggest threat for Belarus now, because there's no control for this weapon, even for Lukashenko. If Russia want to use it, they will use it. Just the button for this weapon is on Putin, not on Lukashenko side. So Putin can push the button, nuclear weapon go from Belarusian territory, and Belarusian territory will be attacked because of this, and a lot of civil Belarusians will die. And now we see that lives of millions of people is on the Putin hand, and it's exactly no Belarusian interest in it at all. So so that's why, of course, I think nuclear weapons should be go out from Belarus, come back to Russia.
Yes, that's for me that is very strange net logic, but yes, you're right. They can use this thinking of view.
Yeah, just just to somehow control this escalation, because if nobody wants to start a nuclear war, so maybe if Russia attacks somebody just from Belarusian territory, will be response just to Belarusian territory. Of course, nobody knows what will happen in practice, and there is no experience of nuclear war. And they hope it will never happen. But of course, it's a big, I can say huge risk for Belarus and for Belarusian people, and in general for people everywhere. Because from Chernobyl experience, where Belarus and Ukraine beautifully know that if some nuclear incident can happen in one country, here in Ukraine, and have a big influence for Belarus. Now it can be the same. Maybe Russian nuclear weapon will launch from Belarus, and attack will be also for Belarus. But there's no borders for nuclear weapon. If it will happen, it will also not be good for Ukraine that nuclear war starts on Belarus.
Yeah, now in Ukraine we have a lot of discussion about the problem of Ukrainian refugees and the ways how we will be returned them to the country, and indeed many people has already don't want to move back, and currently 300,000 Belarusians are in exile too. Many of them have already gotten used to living in Poland and Lithuania. How can we encourage to return the Belarusian after the regime change?
It's of course I can say that it's $1 million question, because it's really important to somehow engage people to come back to their countries after some war, political crisis, whatever. And of course, we can use two type of arguments. One of them, it's a moral argument that it's important to come back to your own country, to your motherland, to support your motherland in really difficult times. And just, I can say it's also part of this moral argument. It's just a nostalgia. People want to come back to their cities, towns, villages. It's a normal thing for everybody. And of course it's important argument, and it will work in some part, but also we should think about some rational arguments. Why there is some sense for people to come back to a new democratic Belarus or new really free Ukraine after the war with the whole territories. We should find some rational arguments for these people. Arguments why they can beautifully live here, start the businesses, start the artistic, scientific career, whatever. People should know that there's no some restrictions against them. There's no corruption or some difficult procedures, because of course it's so difficult to explain to somebody who live in Germany, for example, in 5 years, why he should come back to a Belarusian or Ukrainian town. And that's why I think it's a really great, it should be a great stimul for new Belarusian authorities, for Ukrainian authorities after the war, for really strong reforms, rebuilding, liberalization of a country, really European way, European integration, because we know that I can say that the price of this price will be not some general ideas in the future. No, the price is these people, Belarusians or Ukrainians, who live outside our countries, and if we want to they bring their experience, European experience, their education, their contacts, their money. If we want, they will bring it again to Belarus and Ukraine. We should fight for that. We should find some ideas. We'll have to do it.
And by the way, now Lukashenko is trying back Belarusian home, but he don't allow them making any real estate or other paperwork without his personal persistence. Does it work, and how exactly? Could you elaborate on that?
Really, it's a really good example how it totally doesn't work. Because Belarusian authorities also see that it's a huge problem on the labor market. We see how every month there is more and more people that they want to hire, but there is no them. First of all, it's medical personnel. It's more and more every month Belarus need and have no idea how to find these persons. So that's why, and because of this, and because of political sense, Lukashenko is starting the campaign come back to Belarus. There's no problems. Everything will be okay with you. And of course, there is some persons who really believe it's possible. They come. Most of them was arrested because they took part in political activities before, and that's why they come out from Belarus. Of course, it's really the worst way to promote this campaign, arresting people who already come back to Belarus. And of course, we see that even if we forget all of the questions about the politics, about the war, in general, there is no really good atmosphere now in Belarus because it's a country on sanctions. We can't normally launch business. We can't normally work, for example, in university because of your political background, because of your take part in a protest in 2020, for example. And it's really difficult to find some reasons why people should come back to Belarus now. It's dangerous and there's no perspectives. And that's why nobody take part in this program. Even if you look for propaganda, they say that during 2 years of this program, just a few persons participate in it. It's even more than 100. So of course it's totally loose, and that's why I think why we say before that if country want to encourage people to come back, country should do something for it, not just declare. And this Lukashenko program, it's a beautiful example why just declaration doesn't work.
Yes, and now there are 1,422 official recognized political prisoners in Belarus, and many have already served their sentences. Do the people have a chance to receive official compensation from the dictatorial regime somehow another way?
So, of course, if we speak about in a future new democratic Belarus, of course, there will be compensations for everybody, and we see how now democratic political forces they work on it, how they make some ideas how it will work judicially. But of course, now in the current situation, of course, there is no any compensation for political prisoners, because from Lukashenko regime perspective, whole of political prisoners it's just criminals. There is no any political prisoner status. And of course, all of them is criminals. They sentences to prison. And well, what compensation we can talk about? They are crimes. No compensation for crimes.
For what about that possibility for Belarus people to sue through the EU courts and other else?
Unfortunately, for Belarusians, there is no no official way how to push Lukashenko regime for any compensation, because Belarus is not a part of the Council of Europe and never was. So that's why Russian citizens, before they have possibility, go to European court. For Belarusians, there is no such possibility. So before Belarusians can use a human rights committee of UN and asking for how to somehow protect their rights here, but now Belarus re-signed some resolutions, and Belarusian citizens have really no formal way on a international area how to protect the interests. There is no any court or somebody else who can do it. So unfortunately, that's what the regime want to say. That you can't find any solution. You can just go to us and do what we want, and that's why Belarusians they not agree with that and ready to fight against this regime and want to change it.
Yes, I hope you can do it. Now there are rumors circulating that Lukashenko and his family have purchased real estate in the United Arab Emirates. For what purpose? Or does Lukashenko hope that the country will not extradite him to justice?
So, of course, I can't comment on these rumors and can say is it true or not. Maybe they have some apartments in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Why not? A lot of persons like the cities and buy apartments here. But if you talk about political sense, also I'm not an expert in the Middle East. But as I talk with my colleagues who are really experts in this region, the point is that on the Middle East in general and United Arab Emirates particularly, they're ready to holding doors open for everybody, even with a bad reputation, like Lukashenko. Yep, but there's no cases for some dictators in exile living here.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, for Lukashenko, this case is really bad because, for example, on the post-Soviet territory, we have only two examples. We have case of Yanukovych living somewhere in Russia and looks like totally controlled by Kremlin, have no possibility for some private activity or whatever. And we have case of Kurmanbek Bakiyev, Kyrgyzstan dictator in exile. But Kurmanbek Bakiyev and his family, with their money, they live in Belarus. Lukashenko gives them a place. So, of course, for Lukashenko, it's really bad news because he can't find any great solution. What he can do, where we can find, some good place to live outside in exile. And as I say, I'm not an expert in the Middle East, but as my colleagues say, there is no examples like this. And Arab countries, they welcome any like a dictator or some businessman with money. Yeah, you're welcome. But if there's some political problem, you're in exile. Sorry, no.
Yes, I hope it will be the vicious circle for Lukashenko back to Belarus again and again and again.
Yeah, of course, come back to Belarus, to Belarus. I mean. Go to Belarusian normal free court. Yeah, and this court make a good statement about Lukashenko.
Yes, and for the end, are Belarusians interested in the topic of Ukrainian-Russian war? Does the liberation of Belarus still depend on Ukrainian victory? What do you think?
I think it's of course two questions. We can start about the connection between Belarus liberation and Ukrainian victory. I think it's a little bit bad idea because it simplifies the situation. It's so easy to say that if Ukraine will win in this war, so Putin regime will fall and Lukashenko regime will fall and everybody will be happy, free and democratic, and that's all. But unfortunately, in practice, I think, first of all, it's a big question. Ukraine will win. Okay, how it will look like? It's about win now or come back of the whole territories, Donetsk, Lugansk, and what about Crimea? And it's like the first step, and it's already difficult. Ukraine will win. Nobody knows. Okay, will Russia will be democratic without Putin next day? Of course not. It will be maybe a long period, maybe not Putin, but somebody, or maybe will be Putin a few years, maybe after them, someone as a figure, maybe not so democratic. It's a long process. Even a situation with this small Russian support, or even without Russian support, will Lukashenko regime go down next day? Also not. It also will be a long way. and it will be a long way. And if we want that Belarus will be not only a country with another person on a presidential position, but if we win, if we will, Belarus will be free and democratic, independent country. It will be an even more long and hard way. So that's why I think it's really simplifies that. Okay, Ukraine will win on a fight on a battlefield, and Belarus will be liberated. Unfortunately, it's not so easy. Also, if we back to the question about Belarusian opinion and what Belarus is interested for, of course, if we say about Belarusians politically active, for looking around, of course, all of us looking a lot for Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine, because it looks like just another way of this fight between freedom and dictatorship. Sometimes, they fight on the streets, on the protests. Sometimes they fight in a war when some country invades another country. Sometimes it looks like in Kazakhstan when ODKB forces coming here, air troops to support not so democratic regime. It will be different, can be different forms. It's it's one common fight. All of us fighting for independence, for freedom, for normal democratic life, European way. And on the other hand, it's dictators who can be in Kremlin or supported by Kremlin, who fighting not for future but for past, who want to come back to USSR, to Russian Empire or whatever, who want to control the whole freedoms, no democracy. So that's why for all of us there's no point it's our war. Not, of course we support Ukraine, we support Ukrainian people, and of course even people in Belarus who are not so politically active, because we know same in Belarus and Ukraine or everywhere, not everybody is a strong politically understood and democratic person. No, it's a lot of different persons. But everybody knows that, as I said before, war is really bad. And I know that some personal stories when people, my friends, they live in on the south of Belarus, in the big cities, and how they just sleeping, and it's at the early morning they hear the sound of aircrafts flying, and they sleeping, and they thinking, okay, it's a Russian aircraft coming from Belarus to Ukraine to bomb Ukraine, or maybe it's a Ukrainian aircraft flying from Ukraine to bomb Russian airbase in Belarus. And when you're sleeping and thinking like this, you can be not so involved in political situation, but of course everybody knows that this is bad situation. Nobody wants to sleep and hear this military aircrafts on them in the sky. So and it's so easy to understand that of course Belarusians, as everybody, want a free sky, clear sky, and no war. And that's why our hearts, of course, on Ukrainian side, and we really hope that this war will be stopped as soon as possible, and of course Ukraine will win, because it's so important to show the whole of dictators that they can't just use the power and win now.
Yes, of course. Having asked all my questions, I would like to thank you for spending time with us, and I hope you join us next time. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!